right? When he was like, it's gonna hurt and it's not gonna be pleasant, I'm like,
And it's
okay.
inside her, and it's his, and he's got to take it back. I mean, I'm sorry, okay? My adult brain sees sexual subtext in very unfortunate places sometimes. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Romancing the Monsters. I'm Em.
I'm Seth.
And today we are discussing Lakesedge by Lyndall Clipstone. It is her debut novel. As you're listening to this, it is now out. It's now out in the world as of September 28th. But we are recording this in the past because, full disclosure, we were given an arc of this novel. Not necessarily for a review, but here we are. We were already planning to read this book for the podcast because it fits all the boxes that we like, you know?
Yeah.
So it worked out. But yeah, important to disclose those things, but thoughts and opinions are our own.
Our own, exactly.
Yes.
Fair warning beforehand, there are some trigger warnings in here. Mentions of suicide or attempted suicide, death, drowning, self-harm. There's a lot of touchy subjects in this, so just be warned that we will be mentioning or talking about a few of them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Also, if you are in the UK, we are aware that this book is releasing in October for you, which is sad, but just skip on this episode because it will be spoiler heavy, and then you can come back once you've read the book.
Yeah.
All right. So,
okay,
Steph, let's jump into it. What is this book about?
Okay, so this book is Gothic Romance, and we start off with Leta, Violetta, is her full name, and she and her brother Arian, how would you say that? Is it Arian?
I was saying Arian.
Arian. Her brother Arian has magic, and it's the darkness, basically, and he gets nightmares, and their adoptive mother, both their parents had died previously, she doesn't accept that he has this darkness within him, and she doesn't want him to have that at all, so she pulls him to a shrine, or an altar, and tries to burn away the magic that leaves like residue on his fingers and his hands, and tries to get him to pray away the darkness that he has within him. And she kind of gets him to let go of his magic by making his sister Leta kneel on broken glass at the altar, and she obviously gets injured there because the glass is embedded into her skin. And so we find out early on that their adoptive mother isn't accepting and loving and caring towards them. And Arian really wants to escape and run away, and that opportunity kind of arises in the form of Rowan, who's known as the monster of Lakesedge, because he had murdered his whole family, or it was perceived that he murdered his mother, his father.
Allegedly.
Yeah, allegedly. His mother, his father, and his brother as well. It's just perceived that he drowned them all.
And he does not deny it. At first, anyway.
No, he does not. And he's there to gather the tithe. And he witnesses Arian's magic and everything that happened in this forest. And, like, his magic was just going bonkers. And Rowan was like, oh, damn, okay, I need this guy. So he goes to their house, and they go back home, and then they see him. And he's like, I'm taking Arian. And Leta obviously loves her brother and doesn't want him to be hurt, because she knows of the rumors of Rowan. And so she kind of forces herself to go as well. And then they find out that Rowan actually wants Arian to work with another alchemist named Clover to get rid of the corruption that lives within the lake. So his estate is right by the lake. That's all like black, and like the mud is even like you just feel the bad juju.
Yeah.
And
bad juju. Okay.
and that's where his family was drowned. And yeah, so that's the reason why he wants Arian there. And Leta was like, okay, my brother better not die, better not get hurt. And she's just overprotective for her, like with her brother. They try to destroy the corruption, and it doesn't work the first time, and instead it attacks them. And we kind of see Rowan having to give his blood as a tithe to calm it down. And that would just mean slitting his arm and like giving his blood away. And during that time, we know beforehand that he has like black veins all over. And then Leta actually sees the veins getting more prominent, and like he seems to be losing himself a bit. His eyes change and his teeth become sharper. And we know that something's going on with this corruption and Rowan. Leta's also getting really intense dreams of drowning and whispers of her name, and she doesn't know what they mean, but for some reason they lead her out of the house, the mansion, and she sees Rowan at the edge of the water, and she sees him give blood, and there's obviously the corruption isn't attacking anyone at this point, and then she realizes it's like an offering. We kind of figured out at this point that she also has magic of her own, and it's just a little smidgen of magic, and
she's like halfway through the book at this point.
No, I'm not. This is like
Steph is recounting the whole book.
No, I'm not, but like this sets up the rest, okay? And then I'm done.
Because you just want to talk about a certain someone.
Sadly I won't even mention him in this recap, but we'll get to him.
Fine.
Anyways, she removes the grip of corruption with her own magic that it has on Rowan, and Rowan is confused because she said from the get-go that she didn't have magic, and we kind of find out after their heart-to-heart, or during the heart-to-heart actually, that she did have magic, but after her parents died, her and her brother didn't really have a home, and they were living basically in the forest, and they were supposed to die in the fire that actually destroyed their whole village because of the sickness that was there and the sickness that had killed her family, I believe. And so she gave up her magic in exchange for her brother's life, and we find out that maybe there's a chance of her getting it back for one night only to destroy the corruption. And
oh, how hard it is in your eyes. I can see it in your eyes how hard it is not to mention him.
Honestly, man, I just like the man we are talking about is Lord Under, okay? And he's fine.
He is, but you know what? You and I, Seth, are gonna have to control ourselves, and we're not gonna mention him yet. Okay, we need to give everyone else that comes before a chance.
I agree.
Because we're just going to dissolve into Lord Under fangirls. Okay, so what did you think of this book? How did you like it?
I mean, like, I don't know if it's any surprise, but I loved it. Like, I loved everything, beginning to front and in between. I loved it all. I think the characters are really well written and, like, well developed. The story progressed really well, and it still it's still in my head days after I've read it, and I want to live in that world again. I want to revisit these characters. I want to just be there with these characters because I felt like they left a really big impact on me. I will say, just the beginning of the story kind of like, it was just a bit challenging for me to get into it, but once I got into it, like I would say chapter 3, I would say, like around chapter 3, I was more like, I was invested and I was like really into the book.
Yeah, I mean, I would say about the same for me. I really, really enjoyed it. I don't read Gothic romance all that often, but I think it was really, really well done here, where, at least for me, what Gothic romance means is like, essentially you have nature, the dreamscape, and then reality, and all those things kind of blur together. The lines become so incredibly thin that sometimes your dreams are impacting reality is impacting your dreams, and so on and so forth, and nature is kind of reflecting the characters' own emotional journey. So like when they are angry, usually nature is like, you know, angry as well, and so on and so forth. So obviously here there's a lot of pain in this novel. and especially on Rowan's part, and that's reflected in like the lake and, you know, the anger and the monster under his skin and everything. So I really, really loved that aspect of it. It's so atmospheric. You know, like every time there was a new scene, Lyndall, I don't know if it was on purpose. I'm guessing it probably was, but it's like all the senses were covered. Like you knew what it was smelling like. You knew what it looked like. You know what it felt like on, you know, your fingers. You knew everything. And that for me really sets the scene where you feel really immersed into what's going on, to the point where you don't even realize how much the characters don't really have as much inner dialogue as we're used to. You know, like the characters don't need to tell you, here's what I'm feeling right now. Here's what I'd like to do. Here's this, here's that, because everything else around them, every element of their environment is transpiring what it is that they want or what it is that they're feeling in that moment. So you don't need them to tell you. Another aspect that I thought was really interesting was, obviously, I mean, we talk about, like, it's kind of known that, like, all narrators are unreliable.
Yeah.
But Leta here was especially unreliable because she was truly actually lying to the readers, at least in the beginning. Like, I really wasn't expecting that. Like, at first I was like, oh, it's kind of cool that it's her brother that has the magic and she doesn't. And yet, like, it was still interesting, like, even as a story where she didn't have the magic. And yet, obviously, as you said, like, later on we realized that no, she did have magic, but she didn't tell anyone, including us.
Exactly. And I liked that aspect.
Yeah, I really did too.
I really liked that we found out important points with the characters.
Yeah. So anyway, and I mean, obviously, we do love a good monster on this podcast. You know.
Yeah.
And there were plenty of them in this book. So, you know, all kinds of monsters. You know, sweet, soft, emo boy who thinks he's a villain to, you know, proper Death Lord characters that we will not mention.
Who could really, really, really get it.
Yeah. I mean, they could both get it. You know what I mean? Like,
no, yes, exactly.
I don't want to talk about Lord Under too much right now because I do feel like Rowan is a main character in the story, and I do want to talk about him because I do love him and I do think he deserves happiness and I do want him to find it.
Oh, 100% agree.
So do you want to talk about Rowan?
Yeah, let's talk about Rowan. I thought, like, his character was a great one, and I loved how he developed as a character and became more confident in himself as the story progressed. But I also thought it was really interesting, like, how closed off and cold he was, and, like, that didn't really deter Leta at all in terms of, like, I guess seeking him out for conversation or even just to, like, ensure that she was there with her brother. Like, she never let his coldness or, like, even the rumor that he killed his family really stop her from, like, pursuing anything with him. Like, not, like, relationship-wise, but, like, getting to know him. Mm-hmm. I thought that was interesting.
I just love that he had, like, all the lines where it's, like, like, you're the last person I would want to.
I know.
And I'm like, yeah, sure, Rowan.
And no, my favorite was, like, you're no one or something. And I was like,
yes, he does say that. You're no one. And I was like, okay, Mr. Ben Solo 2.0.
She's gonna become your everything, mister.
Yeah. They also had, like, a you're not alone line. And I was like, okay, Lyndall, I see what you're doing.
I know, I see your Raylo. I also loved his ear piercings. He had a lot of them. Mm-hmm. Loved it.
Yes, absolutely. Long black hair. You know, he wears a cloak a lot. We love a cloak. We love a good cloak. But I really liked his emotional journey. I think that both him and Leta, the thing that they connect most on is, A, their desire to protect the ones that they love.
Yeah.
But also, like, the fact that if that means putting themselves in the line of fire, that they will do it, which, you know, is kind of, it can be a bit annoying at times, just because you're like, you don't need to sacrifice yourself every single time, you know what I mean? But you get it, like, you understand why they're the way that they are, And I think both of them needed to learn to accept help, which is not
I
an
agree.
easy thing to do, as I'm someone who has a very difficult time accepting help. So, sometimes it doesn't have to be like, oh my God, a life or death situation. Sometimes like it's just little things like, yeah, I need to learn how to say, yes, I need help. Can you help me?
I did like that aspect. And they were so similar as characters. Like they were kind of like mirrors of each other, and
Absolutely.
like their experiences mirrored each other's. And I liked how like Leta saw what happened with him and his family and kind of
Mm.
learned from that, but also like she couldn't help it and kind of made the same choice in the sense where so basically the whole plot with his family, Rowan, when he was a child, he actually had died, and he was, or I guess on the cusp of dying, sorry. And then he promises Lord Under anything, and not really knowing what that would entail and what that would mean for him.
He was 5 years old. Like,
He was
that, no one
5.
ever points that out in the book. And I kept thinking, he was 5 years old. What do you expect him to do?
I know. It was really sad.
Little Bubby at that point. Like, of course he's gonna see a grown-ass man and say, yeah, anything. I just want to go back home.
I know. It was really sad. Like, it was heartbreaking because he comes back, obviously, and
He doesn't know.
he grows up, he turns 13,
Yeah.
and then Lord Under comes back for him, and Lord Under is like, all right, you've had your childhood, now it's time for you to come with me. And then Rowan was like, that's not happening. And then his dad ends up dead from the lake. He drowned in the lake. And then his mother, a few years later, ended up in the lake and she drowned. And then Rowan kind of picked up what was going on and he realized his anything was his family dying. And so he tried everything he could to keep his brother Elaine or Elan to, not die, not go and drown in the water. But inevitably, his brother does die. And so he loses his whole family to this Lord Under, and also the corruption starts like forming and growing and becoming something larger than himself. And so Leta sees that and she like understands that, poor guy didn't really stand a chance there. He didn't really know. Like you said, he was only 5. And then I don't even know how to go about this, but then she decides, I don't know, do you want to explain that yet?
No, but I was gonna say that, and then you could also, like, blame Death or Lord Under and be like, because those are synonyms in this case. And you could say, like, oh, well, like, you took advantage of a child or whatever. But the truth is, I mean, I think he's just a metaphor for death in general, and death is unfair to everyone and treats everyone equally. There was nothing he could do. He had to do what he had to do, and he did give Rowan a couple more years of his life, so.
Exactly. And like you said, death isn't fair, and you just, you don't even know when it's coming. And in this case, Rowan cheated death twice. And also, Lord Under, he doesn't really...
We should probably explain why we keep, making that mistake.
All right, so we early on in the podcast we did an episode on Keturah and Lord Death by Martine Levitt.
Amazing book.
It was amazing book. Highly recommend you read that book if you haven't already. Also, go listen to our episode if you would like.
Yes, it was a great one.
Us lusting over another
Death
Lord of
character.
Death again. So that's where that's from. But I don't know where I was going with this.
Where we were going is that there are similar themes in both of these books, and also similar journeys, I find, for Leta and Keturah, in the sense that Keturah's journey is all about, she's scared of death at first. Mm-hmm. She's scared of it, she doesn't want to acknowledge it, etc. And her whole journey is about learning to fall in love with death. That's her journey. She falls in love with death. Oh, you are winking my way. We are so horny for that death. We need to stop.
I know. What does it say about our taste in men, though? What is this? We love Hades. We love Lord Death. We love Lord Under. What is wrong with us? Why are we so in love with death?
That is a question for another day. But So the journeys are very similar because I don't know if you will agree with me on this, but for me, Leta's journey was also a journey of acceptance, but not necessarily
Mm-hmm.
of death, but more so of power and her fear of power, which has is something that she's carried with her whole life. So, and obviously, in both cases, that journey involves a character who has all of that. You know, so Lord Under is power, and Lord Death is death. So,
Exactly. Sorry, I was just like envisioning our man.
yeah, you better not make that mistake, bitch.
Hey, shut up, actually. I claimed him and he's mine, but I'm willing to share him with you. We can share him.
Because in that case, if we follow that logic, then you can have Lord Under, but I get Lord Death, because I knew him first.
I never said I claimed him because I knew him first. I just said
Well,
I
you just
claimed
said you
him.
claimed him. Well, I claimed Lord Death first.
That doesn't work. Okay, we're not doing this because it's gonna take a whole 2 hours of us just
Fine.
fighting. Anyways.
Yes, okay, so back to this conversation of Leta and her fear of power. I think for me in the book, it starts with her brother's power. And there's something really interesting where every time it's mentioned, she refuses to acknowledge that it's his. To her, it's like, no, it's dreams. It's not a real power. He doesn't have this like shadow thing inside of him.
And Arian feels that. He knows that
and it's affecting
his sister is afraid of his power.
Yeah, and so he doesn't acknowledge that it's his either.
Yeah.
Even though he knows it is. And obviously once they go to Lord Under, once they go to Rowan's manor or whatever, I don't know what,
I guess his
estate, that's when Arian kind of really flourishes into what he's meant to be, and he, for the first time, he feels like he can be free to use his power and not be afraid of them and learn how to use them and everything. And Leta sort of sees that, and she sees that she's been in part responsible for her brother sort of smothering that side of himself for years and years and years. Obviously, there was also the fact that their mother, well, stepmother, whatever, was highly superstitious. And I think that superstitions are kind of something that are carried throughout the novel, of like fearing what you don't know or don't understand, which again plays a part into Leta's own journey, personal journey. Can I throw a little theory out there and see if you
All right, let's see it. Let's hear it.
Do you see
Lord Under is hot? Yeah.
Yes, but do you see the Hades and Persephone of it all?
The pomegranate? Yes.
Pomegranates. I was like, is this supposed to be subtle?
It was not.
Excuse me. So Leta uses pomegranates to summon Lord Under, which I was like, hello, Persephone.
Is that like a known thing? Is that like something like, if you want to summon Lord Under, you gotta use a pomegranate?
Well, no, what I was wondering was like, am I missing something? And it's just like, she just Googled it and like people actually do. I don't fucking know, but I was like, or was she really trying to like wink wink at Persephone, Hades and Persephone?
Yeah,
I don't
and
know.
Be like, I'm ready to be your Persephone.
But it doesn't stop there, because Leta's powers can make things grow. Like, she loves to use her powers to make flowers and trees and stuff like that. I was like, hello, Persephone.
That is a point I have to talk about.
Well, talk about it. Go.
No, I'm just saying, like, the little nods to Persephone, and like, obviously Hades is like, it's so telling and just right in your face. And and the way the book ends, it kind of seems like, maybe we might be going in that way. We don't know.
I mean, at that point, I was fully expecting him to be like, okay, fine, you can go back, but you're going to come back every 6 months. I was ready. I was waiting for it. Also, one thing about Keturah and Lord Death, which I don't want us to keep on comparing them, but
yeah, of course.
They're both great books, and if you like one, you'll love the other. And one thing about that book was that it was low-key horny. This book is also low-key horny. Like, it gives you those vibes, including a scene in which, because we
The
just
same scene with the pomegranate. Is that what you're gonna
yes, in
referring
which
to?
so Lord Under literally uses his claw and then like licks the juices off of her pomegranate, and that sounds lurid. And
then he also, her blood, he also, I don't know if it's on the knife or on the pomegranate, he licks it off, and like she hears him swallow.
It's
I know, I needed a moment.
So when the horny is not so low-key, actually.
No,
yeah.
It's not. I'm not complaining. I enjoyed that.
I'm not complaining either. I mean, I wanted to talk to you about this, actually, because so Leta is 17 years old. And I really appreciated that she was allowed to be viewed as someone to be desired and someone who can feel desire and act on it, despite her age. Because I do think there's a very, like, what's the word, Puritan thing going on with YA, where it's like, ew, you know, it's disgusting to make teenagers kiss and everything. Like, it, some people will even say like, oh, it feels wrong, like I'm watching my kids or I'm being a pervert or whatever. And I'm just like, no, because imagine the 17-year-old girl who reads that and is like, feels empowered by it, you know, and feels like, yeah, like I should be allowed to feel those things, and like it's okay and it's normal, and you know, and I think that Leta finds that connection in the act itself, and like it's not like overly descriptive or anything, but it is like, you know, on page, and then it sort of fades to blackish. Well, I mean, no, definitely fades to black.
No, it's there.
But, you know, you get a good chunk before the actual act of, like, you know, where it's...
Exactly. And nothing's really described lewdly or, like, vulgar or...
It's graceful in how it's portrayed, but also, like, you know, she has desires, and they are on page, and she's allowed to feel them, and there's no shame in it, and she feels a connection and empowerment in the act and with Rowan, and
she initiates all of it, basically.
She initiates all of it and is very consensual, you know.
Yeah,
and
I like
permission
that take.
before touching everything and anything. So
Rowan is a sweet boy. And talking about Rowan as well, I feel like it was not even a blink and you'll miss it. He does talk about it. He is bisexual.
He is, yes.
And I loved that. And I love that, you know, it was in the book, and I love that it was talked about, and like it wasn't treated as anything, you know, different. It was just like, oh yeah, I liked this one boy. Didn't go anywhere, obviously, because Lord Under came. But like, sorry, never mind. My mind went somewhere. Anyways, and then yeah, that's all that happened, and then they talked about it, and then. Yeah, I liked that.
I do feel like in some books, it's like they want you to notice the character so much, you know, the LGBT character so much that they're like, look, he's right there. He's right there. And you're like, okay, my God, he's just a normal fucking human being. You don't need to point it out so much. So in this book, I liked how it was done for all the characters. Like, it was never so in your face that you're like, oh my God. Like, can you yes. And also her brother. Her brother says he prefers boys, which is like, it's just mentioned and then never again, because would you know, they are normal human beings, and they shouldn't be like, you know.
Yeah, that's just what it is.
Yes. I love that it wasn't like they stuck out, you know, which I find is what happens a lot when they just want them to be so obvious.
Okay, since we're still talking about like personal growth and like just characters on their journey in general, the scene where Leta stole the key that was in Rowan's room, and then we find out later on it opens a garden, and once they go into that garden, both of them, it's kind of like they open the key to, like, I guess, conversation and having meaningful communication.
He gives her a key to a garden. Like, the Persephone of it all just keeps on growing and growing.
Yeah. Is that a pun?
Pun, yeah.
I love it.
For once, I intended for there to be a pun.
Woo woo!
I'm so proud of myself.
But yes, anyway, so that's when Rowan decides to share more about his past and like his situation, and that's where they also have their first kiss.
Yeah.
In the garden, once they've, unlocked their hearts and like shared things about their past that they didn't tell anyone. And I liked that. I thought that was a really good like little metaphor.
I loved all of their interactions, Rowan and
Yeah,
Leta.
Rowan
Like,
is a great guy.
I don't think that this book is gothic fantasy. This book is gothic romance. Like it's a romance with fantasy elements and not like a fantasy with
heavy
romantic
on the romance
elements.
for sure.
Heavy. I think almost every scene has Rowan and Leta together, like doing something or like and I love that. Like I do love their relationship. I'm torn. Okay? I finished this book being really torn on what it is I want. I mean, I know what I want for myself, but for Leta, I'm torn.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Rowan was a great character, and like we said before, his growth as a character, like as a person, and like the way he's just become like this great man that like is so patient, so kind, and like he's struggling, but he's getting better, and like he's overcoming a lot of his traumas. But like obviously they're still there. Because he has like heavy guilt, like you said, like he just has so much guilt. His family died in his mind because of him. It's only because Lord Under never really gave him all the information or like actually told him what was going to happen, and that kind of comes into play later on with him and Leta as well. And she doesn't know what she's getting herself into despite Lord Under knowing everything, and knowing how it's going to play out, and it's not either of their faults.
Yeah. And for Rowan to be like, it's easier for them to believe me a monster type of thing than like...
Yeah, because he knows eventually he will become one.
Well, he does.
He'll be consumed by the corruption, and he's like, I might as well not have anyone around me. I don't want to hurt anyone, and let them continue believing that I killed my family because I believe it too.
Which, Monster Rowan, kind of hot, not gonna lie. Murderous as hell, but into it.
Monster Rowan was so hot. I'm sorry, but like when they were kissing, I know,
the fangs, the blood, I was here for it.
Marge.
I was here for it. You
Did.
don't need to look at me like that. I was here for it. So, should we get into the monster of the story, maybe?
Sure.
I don't know, because it just feels like a good place, considering.
Yeah, no, okay, let's go into the monster, and then I also wanted to talk about other things. But let's do the monster first. So, Marge, what do you think the monster of the story is?
Okay, so I think there's a lot in this book. Well, first of all, I kind of mentioned it, but the superstitions and how they make their way into communities, and the result is often someone gets shunned or ostracized and depicted as a monster as a result because they are different or people don't understand them. Or so obviously there was that, and that, had an impact on several characters in this book. I also think obviously a huge one for, probably for both Leta and Rowan was guilt.
Yes.
Like, they blame themselves for everything. And like a small one, which I want to say ahead of time that, like, again, I do not blame the characters for making the decisions that they've made, but this idea of self-sacrifice, always self-sacrifice. And I feel like Erin has a really good moment in this book where Leta is about to once again sacrifice herself for him to protect him. And he tells her something like, if you just give me a moment, maybe I can find it. So Erin says, you and Rowan are both so determined to throw your lives away. Look at what he's done, trying to fight this corruption on his own. He's poisoned himself. He's made himself into a monster. And you, blah, 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 you did this. And then she says, what else was I supposed to do? And he says, you didn't even think, Leta. You act like my only choice is to stay back, that it doesn't matter if you're hurt because I'll be safe. You're my sister. I want you to be safe too. And it's like, I find that in this whole like culture of self-sacrificing and like, you must do the best thing for the people that you love. And if that means dying, then you die. Yeah. I think that Erin is pointing something really important here, which is, do you realize that in doing so, you are asking those same people that you love and want to protect to live a life without you?
Yeah.
You're forcing them to live their lives without you in it. And that's what you're imposing on them by making that choice. And you are not giving them a choice to help or to choose differently and say, listen, I don't want you to sacrifice yourself for me, because whether you want it or not, that does leave something with those people. They know that person self-sacrificed themselves for them.
For
like,
them.
I would want to live with that. Would you want to live with
and
that?
you're projecting that guilt on them as well, that you are, like, being bogged down by.
The guilt is just going to shift place, you know?
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't necessarily stop there, though, because we find out later on that she decides to take Lord Under's bargain, and that is to have the power for the night to stop the corruption. And she decides to sacrifice her only happy memory she has, which is with her family, and also a place beside them in the afterlife. And she's even giving up spending her, like, life in death with Arian, too, because she's like, I will be alone in death. And they don't even know that.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, I won't have you, but Arian won't have you either. You know, like, It goes both ways. Like, it's kind of like people forget that it goes both ways, and that just because you are losing someone, they are losing someone too.
Yeah, and it's like the book ends with Arian not even knowing what she's given up.
True.
And
I mean, I'm guessing that's going to be addressed in book 2, probably.
But it's like, even in death, she doesn't even get the peace of being with her family that died so young in her life. And she made that choice to save everyone else. And the savior complex is just, is really heavy and strong with Leta. And even Rowan, like you mentioned as well. But yeah, it's hard. Like, the way they live their life, and like the way their guilt formed into having this, I guess, self-sacrifice or savior complex is just like, it's just so hard to read about, but it's like you see where they're coming from and you kind of understand their intentions.
Yeah, and I understand that, like, the benefits usually outweigh the, you know, negatives that might come with it. And in the moment, you know, like, it's a very, like, in the moment thing. Like, you have to act, you have to do something, and so you're like, I'ma die.
Yeah.
What about you? What are
mine? So I labeled it as their savior complex. But I have another one that's more like on the nose, I guess. It's Lord Under and his lack of humanity or, like, empathy. And I feel like that's just a given because he is the Death Lord. Like, he is not supposed to have, like, emotions and things like that because he's doing a task that's very, you know, it's just like, it's unfair. It's an unfair task to put on someone. And, like, he isn't human. He's never portrayed as such. He's known as, like, having fangs and, like, multiple eyes. And shocking, I liked that with him, but I loved all about him.
And two sets of teeth, like 2 mouths.
Yeah.
Like, superimposed, and then one of them sort of fades out.
Yeah. And he also has, like, multiple eyes. Like, when he's in his, like, I guess his god form, you see it, but then when he's just, you know, what he looks like to Leta, he doesn't have it. But he doesn't even blink an eye when, you know, he had no, like, when Leta was like, okay, you can have my memories of my family, and she's crying and sobbing, and he's like, all right, I'll take them. Like, he just doesn't have that human emotion that, you know, that would allow him to feel anything for that. And why would he? He's a god. He doesn't play by our rules. He lacks a moral compass, and he also doesn't really pay attention to fairness or, like, what's right or wrong because he's a god. He was never raised as a human.
He's above those things.
Exactly. But he does have a strange connection, and he feels something with Leta, and they always, like, it's always, like, italicized or something, like the word connection with them. And I'm curious to see that explored in book 2.
But it's like a 3-way thing now.
It is. It does end that way.
I don't know how I feel about that. But isn't that, like, part of the appeal of it, is, like, having this godly, inhuman figure who doesn't understand human feelings, and then you have this very human girl who is very beneath him in every way, and yet she brings out the humanity in him, and she forces him to feel those things.
Yeah.
I think she does it in a few parts, you know, nothing huge, but I mean, I'm looking forward to book 2. hopefully.
I'm really looking forward to book 2. No, I was just gonna say, I feel like you kind of see, like, his little touch of caring empathy or whatever when so after she has to enter the under when she realizes that the corruption needs to be healed from the ground up, and so she goes there, and then she doesn't know until later on, like as it's happening, that she has to take the corruption into herself, and Lord Under knew all about it and didn't tell her, and she's like, oh my gosh, you're an asshole, like why would you not tell me? She doesn't say those words, but anyways, we kind of see his empathy, or like like he cares just a smidgen when he like goes to like not comfort her, but like tells her, okay, I'll let you go back up there and like, you know, go back to your family, and like he even lifts her and like cares for her. I know I'm using that word, but like,
I mean, he heals her every time she has to cut herself, first of all.
Yes.
Second of all, his smile softens a lot. Have you noticed? Like, it will soften for a minute, and then it will go back to being cold and cruel.
Yeah,
but
and
like,
then she'll blink and it'll be gone.
Yes, but you're like, ooh, I noticed that. There's a softness somewhere in that man. I mean, I do think he cares for her in his own way, which is not the human way. But
no, of course
not. In his
not.
own way, I mean, she's the only one. She is the only one, people. She's the only one who can see him and talk to him and summon him. She's the only one for him.
And as she gets underneath, you know, in the under, or that's what it's called, right? The under, she can touch him.
And she's the only one who can go alive.
Yeah.
Persephone, is that you?
And can we take a moment and look at how lonely Lord Under is, and like imagine his surprise.
Yes.
He was so shocked and like pleasantly surprised when like she fell into his chest, and he's like, oh, we can touch.
Yeah, and he was so proud and happy when, I mean, maybe I'm superimposing those feelings on him, but when she touched the tree and she could hear and see the memories attached to it, he seemed, at least to me, like a little bit proud, like he could he was able to share that with someone else.
Yeah, because like I feel like, I guess it's a common idea that we think of death as like like lonely and like cold and sad, and I guess in this instance you see that it's not. It's full of happy memories, and you're living them, and like you're with the people that you love. But you don't necessarily think that, and I don't think Leta also thought that as well. And I liked that she got to see that side of death.
How do you feel about the fact that the death realm essentially is a forest?
I mean, I thought it was interesting.
I think it is interesting, yeah.
It's a different way to see death, for sure.
I mean, I like it. Plus, especially considering the fact that she likes to grow things, I'm like, interesting that the death realm turns out to be a forest. I don't know. And the forest, she mentions that the forest or the death realm or whatever was morphing for her. Changing for her. And I just want to say that the Lord and the realm are one. So if the realm is changing and morphing, then the men can too.
Drink that tea, girl.
Anyway, I mean, I don't want to put like pressure on.
No, of course. I just think it's important to note these instances and these moments in the story.
And we are who we are.
Because I feel like they're there for a reason, and I don't know what the reason will be. Like, it could just be nothing, or it could mean the world. We don't know. And I think we also need to not just, like, I guess, talk about all the good aspects of it, but we also need to recognize that at the end of the day, he still let the corruption go into her. And poor girl didn't know anything about it. And she thought she was dying, and she kind of is going to die, but then she decides to make another bargain with Lord Under. And she's like, I will worship you and love you up there if you get the corruption out of me. And he's like, all right, it's gonna hurt. And then, you know, that's where the story ends.
Which, I want to know, what's the process to get it out?
Right? When he was like, it's gonna hurt and it's not gonna be pleasant, I'm like,
and it's inside her, and it's his, and he's got to take it back. I mean, I'm sorry, okay? My adult brain sees sexual subtext in very unfortunate places sometimes.
I know. It's really bad, and I really tried to just reel it back in because I know it's a YA
Mm-hmm.
book, but I couldn't, and I'm just ready for book two, and not just for him to take it out or put it back in or whatever, just to see what their dynamic will be like in the Under. Can you stop?
Everything sounds sexual now.
I know. No, but I'm curious to see what their dynamic will be like in the Under,
Yeah.
because it's just like I feel like books don't really have that. Like they don't have the underworld, or like they don't really show life after death. And I'm curious to see what it's gonna be like in his realm and like on his terms. I'm curious to see that.
Yeah, it's just interesting period to see what someone's vision of death is, you know. So, can we circle back to the interesting three-way thing of Rowan, Lord Under, and Leta? Because I
Yeah.
find that very interesting. What's going on there? What do you think is going on there? Because obviously Leta had this connection with Rowan. Like, every time they touch, something happens. Like, her magic stirs the same way that it stirs when she touches Lord Under. Like, there's a lot of parallels in, like, she'll feel something with Rowan and then she's with Lord Under and she notices how she feels the same thing. So there's something there that I don't quite understand what's
I
going
don't
on.
understand it either, and I'm curious to see how that's going to be handled. Because the spell still connects them because she did the spell to reel Rowan back. He was consumed by the corruption, and so she had the spell, and it's on both their arms. And like once they touch it, they both can feel each other's emotions or something like that. But I feel like she's only, I don't know if this is just me thinking or overthinking at this point. She's never really spent time with Rowan without the corruption, like he's always had the corruption within him, and the corruption comes from Lord Under. So I don't know if that plays anything or if that holds any impact on that.
That's what I was wondering, if what was answering her was simply the corruption from Lord Death. And once
Yeah.
it's removed, would she still have a connection with Rowan or would it be gone?
Yeah, because we didn't really get to see that. She was basically dying, and then Lord Under took her back.
But then at the end, he was in the world above and she was below, and she mentions that she feels in her heart.
Yeah.
She feels
But
Rowan.
that could be the spell. I don't know. The spell connects them, and I don't know. I genuinely do not know where this is gonna go with the three of them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, like, one of my wild theories about halfway through this book, I was like, could Rowan and Lord Under be the same person somehow,
That's
some
what I
way?
was thinking too.
Because I was like, I love them both. So what do I do? I don't think it's ruled out completely. Question mark?
I don't think so either, and I'm really thinking that she only connected with the corruption within him. I don't know. We'll see. We won't know until next year.
But that's just a magical connection. We have to acknowledge the fact that they did connect on an emotional level, which is probably more important than the magic.
Oh, of course, of course. Okay, I'm gonna say something that's a bit it might make you a little grossed out or like not want it. So you feel free to delete it. I just wanted to talk about it with you. So Leta and Rowan, they're cute, and they were what the other needed in this stage of their life, learning to love and be loved.
Uh-huh.
But I do feel like I'm getting a bit of Tamlin and Feyre vibes. Only that she will outgrow him because he won't be able to understand all that she's seen and done in the Under. And he was right for her in book one, and I'm curious to see if it stays the same. I don't know.
I think I could see it not necessarily in like a Tamlin way where he becomes an asshole, but in this
No,
in the
of
way
course
that
not.
they might not connect anymore because I would understand it if Rowan harbors fear for death his whole life, for the rest of it. Like, he doesn't understand it. For him, it was a power that was painful, and he had to carve himself to his death nearly every month, and bleed for it. And like, I can understand how that wouldn't be something he would probably ever want to feel any sort of sympathy for.
Yeah.
But if she has experienced Lord Under
In the Under?
yeah, down under.
That sounds so dirty.
If she knows him and she talks to him and she comes to understand him in some capacity and sees him with empathy, which I mean she has to, because she said she was going to love him from now on. So that might create a disconnect between them that they can't relate on, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm curious, because that could open another door for them for their emotional journey, but I feel like because they were so love starved and like their story like kind of hit a finale of sorts, in the sense where like they both recognize their love for one another and like they trust in one another, and like they've kind of reached their bliss. And like I unless like obviously in the second book there's emotional trauma, there's like, you know, Rowan is suffering from all that he's done and all that was done to him, and then Leta is also suffering with what's going on, and like they find a way to come together, then I don't know if there's anywhere else for them to go romantically. Like I feel like they've reached their ultimate happiness in this book.
My only question is, say she does end up with Lord Under, what kind of life would that be? Because there is no one there. It's just him.
There isn't.
You know, like for a character like Keturah, for instance, she was dying. So it made sense for her. For her, it was about accepting that it was her time to go. And so when she goes off into the sunset with Lord Death, and you understand that, you know, she's accepting her death at that moment and she's going to die, it makes sense because it was already something that had been kickstarted from before. Here, it's like, well, what kind of life would that be for a 17-year-old? You know, like, does she just live in the world under from now on? And like, what? I mean, that sounds, I mean, I'm sorry, but a little boring.
And it sounds lonely and isolating, of course.
Like, yes, like I wouldn't wish that for her. So how does that work?
Yeah, I didn't think that far ahead yet, but I don't know. And I'm not ruling out Rowan. I love Rowan, and I think his character is amazing. I just don't know where they can go from here. And I'm curious to see where Lindale decides to take them, because they are a beautiful couple and they are written really well. But like there's something about Lord Under and her connection that just like keeps grasping me and keeps like making me turn my head that way, because I want to look at them and experience what they're going to go through, because I think it's going to be interesting. But I still like Leta and Rowan. I don't know. Like you, I'm torn. Like I am torn between the two, and I don't even know if we're meant to be torn between the two. I don't know if the Lord Under and Leta are meant to be a ship or like a couple that we're supposed to be rooting for at all.
I mean, for once, it's two people that I'm okay being torn between. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
you know, I do love me the emo boy that like, you know, thinks himself the villain, and I do love me the death character, you know, personification of death character. So
yeah, of course.
it's a place I'm happy to be in. Like it could be like Tamlin and Rhys, which was not, you know, difficult to choose. I'm not mad at it. And I feel like whatever the answer is, it will make sense, and it has to make sense for Leta and not for Seth and Marge, unfortunately.
Of course. And at the end of the day, I feel like she's also going through a lot, because not only did Rowan take in the corruption, she also took all of it into her. And that's not going to be good for her mentally, I don't think at all. So I feel like a relationship is the last thing on her mind right now. And I think she is going to go where she knows she's loved. And that is with Rowan and her brother and Clover and even Florence. So I don't want her to be alone at all.
Did you have anything else for the monster?
No, I think I talked about everything that I wanted to talk about.
Ooh, can we talk about the fact that Mr. Lord Under
is hot?
Calls her mine?
Wait, he does?
Oh, girl, girl. I got the quote.
Read it out to me.
Oh, well, first of all, let me read you this quote. She's with Lord Under, and they're casting the spell together. And
they hold
she
hands,
says, I feel as though I'm undressed past clothes and skin. I've shown him some hidden piece of myself I didn't even know I had. His power on my power, his skin on my skin, his breath on my throat. My power matches the cold slither of his shadows. At this moment, we are equal. We are connected. Italicized. I mean. But anyway, so the one that I wanted to read was, okay, so she says, I'm not yours. Just because I'm here doesn't mean you have a claim on me. And he says, it doesn't? See? His fingers hover just beneath my chin. I jerk my face away, and the points of his claws scrape through the air beside my throat. He lets his hand drop back, laughing. No, you're not mine. At least, ... Not yet. I was like, not yet? Not yet?
When? Give me a time, a date, a place. When?
I will be here. I will be prepared. I was like, not yet? If you think I didn't say that.
But I will say, you looking at your quotes and like talking about it, it kind of like I remember I screenshotted some quotes that I wanted to talk to you about, because like Leta, despite herself, she still wants him, and like she even uses the word hungered, you know, like she longs for. So I have this one quote. So she's like, if I think hard enough, that I've been forced, that I had no choice, that I can push aside the terrible part of me that is glad to be here, my blood at the altar, a promise ready on my tongue, the part of me that has longed and hungered for this being like, I guess, Lord Under as well as her powers. But I also have another quote. Like, okay, are you ready? Because I wasn't ready. So, light blooms at my palms and the room is illuminated in a crystalline brilliance. Power, my power. The power I'll have on the next full moon. The Lord Under watches me, and the flare of magic dances in his pale eyes. For just one ruinous moment, I wish he could touch me. I want to feel his cold, clawed hand on my cheek, on my hair.
Girl, same.
And I have one last one that, like, these are my receipts, you know?
Yeah.
One last one.
Yeah.
The shadows thin and the light comes back into the room. This is the last time I'll see him. I'll have no need to summon him again. The realization comes with a tiny pang of sadness that I try very hard to ignore.
I noticed that line. I was like, okay, interesting.
So, I mean, she feels something.
Sounds to me like someone who has found someone she's very happy with, but who's like, but I've been made aware that I could get even more with this other person.
I think she's happy and she's safe with Rowan.
She feels understood and like.
But there's a part of her that she, like, as we already mentioned, she's an unreliable narrator. We're not getting all the facts. So I feel like because she even mentioned in her own words that she's trying very hard to ignore her sadness or any emotion that she feels towards him, like any positive emotion, we are not getting the full story. We are not getting what she actually feels and also what he feels, Lord Under. We're still getting everything in her perspective.
Oh, we have no idea what the fuck he's thinking.
No.
None. We know he has a compassionate heart. I mean, you can't sit here and tell me that he's just cruel. Because he did save a 5-year-old boy. And yes, he had to go about it in cruel ways because death is unfair and will remain so forevermore. And he did save a little girl and her brother and, you know, carry them through the forest to safety. And he did save him. And, okay, so he's compassionate.
No, and I feel like we also need to look at, like, we can't look at him with, like, our moral compass and our own idea of what humanity is.
Yes! It doesn't apply to him.
No, because death is, like, for him, he also needs to maintain a balance. Like, he can't just, like, you know, have someone survive and, like, there's no repercussion for that. Yeah. So, sadly, because Rowan loved his life so much, not loved his life, but wanted to live as much as he did, sadly, his family had to pay the price. And it wasn't his fault. It was no one's fault, not even Death's. He had to do what he had to do. And same with Leta. She had to give away her magic that was known to be, like, this massive, and it was fabled to be, like, this intense power. She had to give it up to save her brother. And so there has to be a balance. And, like, sad to say, like, sure, Death is a villain for many people, but it's like Death is just there. You can't really go around it.
Yes, and I mean, balance is a thing throughout the whole book, even through the magic, because, like, Clover can't perform the ritual by herself. She needs dark magic to perform it. So it's like everything needs to even out. So, like, yes, he can show compassion for this child, but that can't just have no repercussion afterwards.
Easy to say that he's cruel and selfish and a villain, but there's more there.
I mean, in the same way that the wound or the corruption had to be mended below and above.
Exactly.
Both. Because those two worlds are one. They act as one.
Yeah. Look at us.
Justice for Lord Under. I mean, it's fine, you know, if Leta doesn't want him, he can have us.
I mean, like, I would honestly not want to share him with you. Like, I mean, if it came down to it.
I mean, no offense taken, because I wouldn't want to share him with you either, so.
Yeah, so, like, but, like, if I have to join the rotation, sadly, I feel like...
Join the rotation?
I just might.
Are you on Wednesdays, or am I on Thursdays?
When in case I mess up my days and I miss my night with him.
Oh my god.
I'm not cut out for this reverse harem life.
First of all, who the fuck is on Mondays and Tuesdays, though? Like, who are the other ones? Who the fuck are they?
And who gets the weekend? That's unfair.
Yeah, right? That's a privilege. Who the fuck is that bitch?
I know.
Oh god. All right. Are we done?
I think we're
covered
done.
everything?
We can only lust after Lord Under for as long as we did.
Yes, I think bottom line, it's a very good Gothic romance where you do have, you know, the lines that blur between dream, person, and nature, and also world above, world below. It kind of, all the lines are blurred everywhere. And I just think that that's an interesting book for us, since it echoes the whole sentiment that we try to talk about in every podcast, which is the monster and the man are not two separate things. They are often one, you know? So I just think for that reason it was a very interesting book to talk about, because it is true of these characters. Yes, they're some of them monstrous in person, you know, they are becoming more and more monstrous as time goes, but I think deep down the real monsters are not what they look like. It is what you let control your life, whether it's guilt, whether it's your fear of power.
You said it really well.
Oh, I don't feel like I did, but
no, you did.
Thanks for the vote of confidence. All right, so if you, well, I mean, first of all, I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you want to reach us online, we are on Instagram at Romancing the Monsters Podcast. We are also on Twitter at the RTM Pod. TikTok is Romancing the Monsters Pod. Right. You can also email us if you want at romancingthemonsterspodcast@gmail.com. And if you want or need captions or prefer that format, we are also on YouTube. Just search the name of our podcast and we shall come up. Feel free to subscribe on there as well. If you want to find me, I am on both Twitter and Instagram at Foes and Lovers.
And if you want to find me, Seth, on both Instagram and Twitter, I'm at Pros with Woes. And also, please feel free to leave us a rating or review on any of the podcast platforms, whether that's Google, Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple, don't know what else, but just feel free to leave us a rating or review. It means a lot to us just seeing that. And yeah.
We will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.